What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Bet Boys, your one-stop shop for all energy drink reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian,
I'm Brian.
and we are the Bet Boys. And that was an aggressive intro by request of Brian. So here we go. Short hiatus. We've both had some crazy schedules, crazy shit happen, but we're back. They can try to stop us, but they can't hold us back. And I'll remind you that we actually have other jobs. We don't just do this podcast thing full time. Not throwing
As much
shade
as
at
we'd
anyone
like to.
specifically, but yeah, that's we both actually have jobs. Brian has two, but we make time. We make time for this. So today we got some good topics lined up. We got some good drinks lined up. I'm gonna go first. I know Brian has a very interesting drink that I'm really excited to see how it is, how he likes it. But I picked up a sugar-free Red Bull, and I have not had this flavor before. It's the Juneberry flavor. I've seen it before. It's kind of intrigued me, but I've never really picked it up. I'm not usually a huge Red Bull guy, but when they do their seasonal flavors, they usually are pretty solid, and especially after they've been starting to make like the sugar-free ones, I'm all in for that to try them out. So just a little 8-ounce can here. I do like the color of the can, and Juneberry, I'm excited to see how it is.
Top that.
Oh, nice
Got a
and
little
crisp
vapor?
as usual. A little bit of vapor, a little bit of fumes.
Love
It
the
does smell
vapor,
like the
baby.
berry. Oh, that's pretty damn good. It's pretty damn good. I'm hoping Brian can say the same about his. It's interesting though. What do you got?
We'll see. I have the newest flavor of C4, and it's not the Mango Fuego, which I did love. This is the Serial Killer. It's the same C4 energy we know and love. So that's the big thing. Nothing's changing about the formula inside this can. What's the two big differences, of course, are how the can looks, which we see a lot of Fruit Loops. So I'm assuming we're going to get like a Fruit Loop kind of flavor with the Serial Killer. I'm wondering if it's going to be, this like androgynous sweet flavor that maybe that's what comes out of it. If we get a little bit more of like the lime, like kind of berry, or is this going to taste like milk? And if it does, I may throw it at the wall next to me. But like I said, same formula, different flavor, different looking can. We'll see what it comes out to. It says it does not contain milk. Great. Is it going to taste like that? I don't know, but we'll find out. Let's pop that top. Little splash zone.
That's crisp.
Oh my God. It smells like Fruit Loops. It's really weird. I want to start off by saying that. It's really weird. If you were to take a handful of Fruit Loops and throw them in your mouth and just chew on them, and like, you get that, like, it's kind of like lime tropical flavor.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, but it's almost like you can taste a hint of like that, like sweet vanilla kind of flavor, like a sweet cream, like you would get like a sweet cream like Starbucks, but it's not that, it's different. It's not bad, but it's really different. Off the cuff, I don't know if this is one that I grab every day off the shelf, but I do know that this would be one that I'm like, oh, that'd be fun, like instantaneously. But I know enough about how delicious energy drinks are. We have a lot of fun talks and a lot of fun topics that we've been building up since we haven't been able to chat. I do want to start with a little bit of a fun one because I just went on a rant on this the other day, and I think it's kind of pertaining to the topics at hand here. And that's, one thing I can't stand about the energy drink industry or supplements industry, sports lifestyle supplementation, is I hate predatory marketing. I think it's the worst thing in the world. And where I'm kind of coming at this is I hate when something is like, this one's marketed for girls. Why does it have to be different? Number one, just make a good product that people will enjoy and people will buy it. If you have to do a scumbag sales tactic to get someone to buy your stuff, you don't have a good enough product. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. But I just can't stand it. It's like, hey, we're gonna make a pink can. It's gonna be, a 200 milligram energy drink that actually tastes like crap, but we're gonna make it pink and fruity, like flavored, even though it's not great. I think we know who we're talking about.
I know
We're not getting
exactly what you're talking about.
we're not
I
getting a
know
sponsorship from them.
I know the flavor you're talking about too.
We're not getting a
Uh,
sponsorship from them. We already ranked them terribly. For any of those that don't know, go watch like essentially episode 1 of Bev Boys when we shit on this drink. But you see it a lot too. Like I know Bloom sometimes does this in Target. Like it's these very like cliche. This is for females. We threw a little bit of biotin in there, or maybe some folic acid, and now it's a female's energy drink versus it being an energy drink. I don't think it should be exclusive to whomever. It's like just have a good product, or like some companies will go out there and they'll say, well, this is a female's protein, or it's a protein for women. It's protein. Everybody needs protein. Why can't, and then they do that and they mark it up $10-15. So a girl goes into like a GNC, doesn't, maybe she's like just getting into this, doesn't know any better. And now she's blowing an additional $15 on a tub of protein when she could have just got one that was $30. That is probably cleaner, a little bit better, but it's black and red, or whatever it is. I hate the predatory marketing in order to upsell a higher price item that's not as good quality.
yeah, I agree too. Where do you think? I'd be interested to hear your take on this. Where do you think is the line between like marketing your product? Because obviously, if you want to sell something, you do need to market it.
Yeah.
Where's the line between that? Is it just the fact that you want to target? Because obviously, target markets are a thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but where's that line between like the predatory marketing and like putting yourself out there and having like this is who our product is for?
Yeah, I think it comes down to like what's like the real differentiating ingredients. Like most of the time, like a multivitamin, unless there's like hormonal health supplementation, like it's going to be the same across the board. Like the daily recommended doses are going to be similar. Vice versa on a pre-workout, like why does it have to be a pre-workout? And they don't necessarily say this is a pre-workout for men. It's always like targeted towards women, which I think is a little bit more predatory. Because it's like, oh, this is, we have this, and it's like they still need caffeine, they still need beta alanine, they still might want citrulline. Like, why can't it just be, hey, we have a good product that people like, that people want? Like,
Mhm.
why does it have to be? And then, like I said, it's the same thing of, you'll see, I won't name a brand. I'm not going to name any names here, but I saw the original C4 formula, which is sold for $30 for 30 servings. It was the exact same formula, which was like 150 milligrams of caffeine, 1.6 grams of beta alanine, maybe a gram of betaine, and like 2 to 3 grams of citrulline malate. It's the same exact formula, but it was priced at $50 and it had a pink and blue label. Why does that have like? That's, to me, that's just predatory. And it's like obviously there's like the consumer of like, let them make the choice. That's what they want to buy, blah, blah, blah. I get that. But at the same time, why can't, then if that's the case, why don't you price it the same? Why don't
Yeah,
you do
why does it have
that?
to be a markup for
Why does
essentially
it have
no
to be a
difference,
markup?
just a
Yeah.
difference in color scheme? Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
I agree that like besides, you know, you might argue that like some females may need like a little bit more like iron or something like that, depending on like what point they're at.
Mm-hmm.
But like other ingredients, like it's the physiology isn't like responding differently to like caffeine, male versus female. And if
No.
it is,
Like
it's because
it's,
of like a genetic thing. It's not because of the sex of the person. So
yeah. And if that's the case, you're probably going to be consulting a doctor on whatever it is
yeah,
at that point.
exactly.
So that's my issue with a lot of those like predatory marketing when it comes to like, especially supplementation. Um, in regards to like sports supplements, like regular or hormonal, that kind of supplementation. Obviously, like you'll see different ones. Like this is a men's health formula. This is a women's health formula where men's might have. You'll see the typical like fenugreek. You'll see ashwagandha. You'll see the horny goat weed,
Yep.
etc. Like, but at the same time, like women can take ashwagandha too. It's a stress support hormone, like
Mhm.
or a stress support like herb. It
Right.
doesn't have to be this or that. It can just
Mhm.
be a stress support herb to take.
Yeah.
Um, but enough on that. Let's get into like some sports stuff here. Let's get
Yeah.
into sports performance before I get too much on a rant.
Yeah. A couple of the topics that I kind of wanted to dig into here was first one, undulating volume and intensity within a program and how that looks like on, a monthly basis, or how can you do that within a weekly basis? And what brought this to my mind is like my specific situation, like pro baseball, we're playing 6 games a week, we're on the road every other week, and just like how you can best change like volume and intensity throughout the season. It's a 6-month season, um, to kind of best put players in a position to both perform well, feel good, but also continue to ideally develop and not like detrain throughout the season, or at least like minimize that to the greatest extent possible. I was talking to our good friend of the show, Gabe Mason, yesterday. We were just talking about how it's like tough with sports that play a lot more games, and how especially players that play every day. Um, but how I'm curious to hear your thoughts of like how do you think about like undulation within your training when it comes to I guess track and field would be a good one too, where obviously you might compete every weekend, but some competitions are clearly hold better and more importance than others, and you're trying to peak almost. So it's very different sides of the spectrum, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts and then.
Yeah. I'll start this off by kind of saying like nothing compares, in my opinion, to the training and game and performance schedule that like a baseball team has to incur. No one is going to have to try and get as much training in season and as well as playing, if you look at a position player, they're probably playing at some point, probably 4 times a week, like depending on
Mhm.
what team and what size of the team. So like balancing that, I think the only thing that's probably close enough would be like maybe a cross country runner who also runs indoor and outdoor track and field because they're in season for 9 months as well. And it's trying to balance how you can develop that athlete and how you can not get in the way at the same time. Like knowing that these performances do matter, but some of them obviously are going to be more so than the others. And I think like where like track and field will differ from baseball is that track and field will be able to say like, hey, you're going to compete this week, but maybe you're competing on an off event. You're not going to be going after this big mark right now. Whereas in baseball, that there's some teams that are easier on your schedule and some that are way harder, but like you also have the chaos aspect of a field-based sport where it could go all haywire and now all of a sudden you're competing, you're straining, and it's like now did we potentially overload you and without knowing this, like that chaos aspect can't be accounted for as much. um
Mhm.
but like when we go into it, and I'll speak from like the track and field side, it's a lot in the aspect of, when I've talked about it on the show before where we have kind of like a 3 to 4 week block, or where it's kind of like a wave. We have our learn, we have our workload, and we have our perform week. And I kind of pair that up, and maybe I'll have 2 workload weeks if we're preparing for a later meet and it's just the schedule lines up in that way. We may compete during those other times, but I'm not worried about those marks. And undulating the intensity, if I kind of break it down in its simplest terms here, that first week in that learn, it's like, we're maybe at like 65 to 75% of our total volume. And the intensity is still relatively high based on the max effort or those like top speed training days. But I'm playing with the volume there. And then I'm going to incrementally increase it, 5 to 10% the following week, get up to what we would be, around that like 100% volume or like 80-ish% of it, in rough terms of that like workload period, but never like the true top of that progression. And if it's a 2 week volume kind of block in there, then we're going to take that next step again, and then we'll drop down to slightly below or slightly above, depending on where we're at in the season, of that learn week, and that's our perform week. The hard part is when you get the intensity in there, inside, like when we were at practice, that's where I'm going to say like the intensity aspect, you can't really leave it away because it's like we still want to be intentful. I may be like knocking down some paces on some of this stuff, but it's still like max speed's going to be max speed. Speed endurance or specific endurance is still going to be speed endurance or specific endurance. You can't really say I'm pulling that back. Um, Otherwise, it's like, hey, we're just going to keep doing tempo over and over and over again, and we're really fit, but we're not getting fast. Whereas like in the weight room, we kind of follow the same blocking, but I'm going to play with the intensities. So as that volume goes up, I'm probably going to pull back on the intensity just to make sure that we can accommodate that volume. Because if both spike super high, we're probably looking at a weird acute to chronic workload. Probably gonna have a soft tissue injury, or and I think I had this like kind of later on, as a point of discussion. Like I'll play with our work to rest times. I think that's been a thing. Like our last block that we did was density sets, and it might be we worked from like an 8x3, which isn't as dense until you put it into an EMOM at like 60%. Then we worked into like a 16x2, but it's at 70, 75 every minute on the minute on like a front squat progression. Worked into a 20x1 every 45 seconds, but we're at 65% again. So the density of the work slowly starts to space out after it creeps up with the volume, and we can get a lot more quality from that. And I think that's one of those things, like for us, it was a great way to, like, in that mid season, like as we transition from outdoor or indoor to outdoor, being able to accommodate getting those workloads back in without just being like, hey, you're going to feel distraught. It just took the main precedence of the session, whereas the overall session tonnage may not have been astronomically higher than it was, the 2 weeks before. But in this particular piece, we had allocated more of the training session time and the training session load to that in order to prepare that we could then pull back from it later and have the intensity kind of conversation of when it does pull back. What I don't want is you just to treat it as a deload, and now we're moving lightweight slow. Now I'm going to have you move lightweights super fast or lighter weights. And I think the last portion that I mentioned there, and actually Coach DeMarco threw a Substack article up on like the intent versus intensity, which, I think that was a great article in that big piece. But I think that plays such a larger role than we like to admit in our undulation of volume and intensity, or like prescription of intensity, if we have high intent. And I think that will leave more marquees towards success than maybe anything else. Like, what do you think on that? How are you kind of playing with that in season, especially with baseball? Like, you have the most hectic schedule, especially being in AAA now. Like, you guys, I mean, you're traveling right now.
Yeah, I think short answer is I'm still figuring it out, which is part of the reason why I've been asking people.
Yeah.
But I think, one, you make a good point. Like, any like field sport is going to be a little bit more like less predictable. You could have like a planned. We try to do our best to still run, like have scheduled like low versus high days, and essentially for us that usually comes like because we know that the game is going to happen at the end of every day. That's kind of like just a given. But adjusting like the early work, what we do in practice before the game, is what we are trying to hopefully like make that a higher or a lower day. But sometimes your low day can kind of turn into a high day depending on what the game brings. I think it's easier to do with like a pitcher. I think pitchers versus position players are like a completely different scenario, especially when you think about like a starting pitcher who's going to be on more of a set schedule. They're probably going to pitch, once every 6 to 7 days, generally, maybe every 5 days, 5 to 7 days generally, and they're going to know like when their scheduled start is. So,
and you probably have an allocated pitch count as well. So it's like you have an upper limit on the volume, whereas like a position player, like you may go to extra innings, but like you're going to be the one affected by it.
Yep. So I think it's a little bit easier there, to kind of, because you mentioned like, okay, like high volume and high intensity is not usually a very good recipe when you're in season. I think it
Hmm.
can, like it probably has a little bit more time and place, like far away from competition when you really are trying to kind of dig people in a hole and trying to like intentionally kind of overreach. But in season,
Yeah.
it's not the best it's not the best
Time.
recipe. But I do think you can kind of, I kind of think about it as like further away, because to me, like obviously like intensity, to me, strictly talking like, I mean, it could be weight room or on field. Um,
Hmm.
Intensity is usually a little bit more systemically fatiguing. I feel like when people actually get like muscularly sore, that's usually due to a little bit more like volume. So I think generally speaking, so I think with like a starting pitcher, it's a little bit easier. Probably going to be able to like stack more intensity, ideally like closer to when they throw. So like say if they pitch in a game, ideally we get them lifting, on that same day, if not like the day after, and then maybe a little bit further away from their start. My thought is if you want to do a little bit more like volume in the weight room, that is, I think that's a good place to put it. You want to kind of put it like where they're going to have at least a couple days to recover. I think that's a little bit easier versus solving for a position player who's going to play, say we play 6 games a week. A lot of guys are playing, they might get one off day. So say you're playing 5 games a week. You have one completely off day where it's just off, no one's doing anything. I don't want to have people do anything on that day. That's where it gets tough, because it's like, I think just like the strength coach brain of like needing to want to like progress things throughout the year, regardless whether it's in season or not. And that's where like I guess I'm kind of like asking myself, like, okay, is it better to just try to run more of like a flat, so-called flat periodization, where you're just kind of maintaining the same volume and trying to get, like intensity and keeping the volume short? Or is it better, like, say, for example, I'm thinking about weekly, like undulation, like within the actual week. We usually play on Sundays and then we have Mondays off. If you're going to try to put a little bit more volume in the weight room, I think that's probably the day to do it, because you can lift on Sunday. We have Monday completely off. And then the Tuesday game is usually a later game, like 6:30, 7 p.m. So you have like a full 48 hours to recover. Or if
Yeah.
you just wanted to kind of put your big lift in for the week, quote unquote, um, yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts. And like I said, like I'm still like figuring this out, which is why I'm thinking about it in the first place. Um, yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts. It's tough too, just because you want you want guys to continue to train and develop, but at the end of the day, you also have to realize that like
They need to
the game,
perform.
yeah, like the games matter.
And the
I
higher
think it
you go, it's
also
only going to matter more.
right. I
So I
think it
think
also I think it also highlights like just the importance of having like a good off season. I think
to carry through.
right, and just like being at like if you're training consistently and training hard, and you're probably allocating a little bit more training economy to the weight room specifically in the off season, then when you do taper down to, you know, you may
That
only lift twice a
maintenance.
week. Yeah, like I hate to put like maintenance, because I still want to believe that we can push, but it's also
Yeah.
like we're playing 150 games. It's tough, but I think, being able to still, I think a good off season kind of carries you well into a good in season period by not like blowing you up as much, because you're used to
Yeah.
training hard.
And that's so there's kind of two things on this note that you kind of really touched on. I think we can, I don't want to say hashtag and expand on, but hashtag expand. And that's like, I don't know if it's mutually exclusive to have an overall periodization or a weekly undulation, right? I think
Yeah.
that the weekly undulation model can really, I think it works best when we have the 3 to 4 week block that we're still undulating in the minor and that microcycle, but like overall we still have that like little bit, even if it's not quite flat, but like just that slight incline of accumulation. Hey, we're
Mm-hmm.
adding another rep, here and there to just increase over time, still deload. But then you have, the tactical periodization kind of model here where it's like, say, that Saturday is going to be that marquee game, that big game. Your midweek may not be as important. Like if we think from like a college baseball perspective, and obviously I'm speaking from like the college standpoint, where you're more so in the pro, where when you're in the pro, every game matters. So it's a little bit more difficult. But in the college, it's like, hey, you're Friday or you're Saturday. You're probably going to pitch your best guy on Friday. You're probably going to pitch your second best guy either Saturday or maybe Sunday, depending on what it is. And it's like, well, you have that like game day -4 kind of layout, and you just put that pitcher in there. The
Mm-hmm.
hard part is as we kind of talked about, is what do you do with the position guys? And it's like
Yeah.
maybe we put if Friday matters the most for the overall of the team, then we have that furthest away from the game, on say Monday or Tuesday if they have off on Monday, and we can kind of work them into that schedule. And you have that like those really, the muscular, like the things that are going to create DOMs and soreness, those high force, deep knee angles, large ranges of motion. That stuff will belong on that, game day -4. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in that sense. And you can have a game day, +2 right before the -4 or whatever it is, to where you can get that in there and it'll get them ready. They can have that and they're going to have time to recover. And maybe you have those conversations, as I would say, like the more integrated that staff becomes, especially within the sports training staff, of having those conversations of like, hey, I know like we want this Tuesday game really bad. These guys are going to be a little sore. So this might be the one that we work in a little bit more in depth on like the 2 deep to bring those guys into it as they kind of go. For you, it's so much harder because not only does like I said, every game matters, but at the same time, you have to get this training in and you're just going to be running 19 different schedules. So for you, it's a very difficult process just to manage, versus like maybe a college. It's like your position guys have to just continuously kind of train through it, but then we have that same conversation of, I believe we've had this within the last 3 months. I know that for sure, of we've always had this little bit of a fallacy. And I know for a fact we talked about this when Kel Smith was on the show, but it's like some of these guys are, we always want to say the higher the athletic development and the more outputs they have, the less load they're probably going to be able to handle, because it's more systemically fatiguing with these higher outputs. But we also kind of shortchange the athlete by saying, you can no longer handle that. Some of these dudes, and to his extent, like he's even mentioned this, of some of these athletes like respond really well to just keeping the volume. They're just having higher outputs and they make these gains. I don't think it's, you're in one box and not the other. I think you can have high outputs and respond well to higher workloads. I've seen that in track and field more so probably than not, which is crazy because it's like as these athletes get faster, and you're like, a great example I have, 400 hurdler. We kind of like pulled back and like had a deload week, and for her it was almost more mental than anything else. Of we didn't have the longer tempo session, so she in her head was like, I don't feel as fit, I don't feel like I'm as ready, because I didn't have that like that workout that made me feel like I can rip this even though I'm fresher. So it's like, how do you keep that in? It's like, well, not only can we kept that in the next cycle, she was responded really well to it, recovered very well, and then had a season's best. And it's like, it's these kind of things is like, you can have pieces like this and you can have these training blocks that you may want to pull back a little bit, but I don't think you have to like unravel the training program in a sense of like, hey, we're deloading, so we're going to all feel fresh. It's like, you can walk it back a little bit. They get the reprieve, but at the same time, whether it be a mental capacity of like, hey, I still feel like I hit that work, I'm ready to roll, or two, like they love the aerobic development, that little bit of extra volume. I say aerobic development in this sense of like my specific example, but I don't think we have to discount the volume that we put in there that may be more submaximal, maybe more muscular taxing versus systemically or neurologically taxing, and we'll still be okay. And I think that that's a little bit of like a communication aspect of like the coach to the athlete of, you can do well despite this. Like, you might be a little sore, but I promise you it's not going to inhibit you. and then having, that quote unquote, the mental toughness to be able to go through that. And then once they see success that it happens, they're more responsive to the following time that like you have to intervene with something like that again. And that success just continues to build off of itself to where what you're doing is less inhibitive to the games, even though you're training through it. That's my thought, which could be completely asinine, and I'm fully aware of that.
No, I think you brought up a good point about how the athletes feel. I think like a lot of times we like to try to think about like what we think is going to be most optimal and ideal for the athlete based on like the schedule. And I have found, especially with like a starting pitcher, like using kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like a soccer thing. Like, all right, match day -1. I'll be like, all right, your start day -1, and I'll have all the things that I think need to go into the training week in the weight room at least, or on the field, and then just kind of like piecing the puzzles together on whether I think like throughout the week when they fit the best, to put them in the best spot. So I think for a pitcher, that's what's helped me. The position players, like we said, is like the tougher part. But I do think a lot of times we like to think about optimal, and we forget about like for a perfect example, like how many times have we heard like keep the high days high and keep the low days low. I've found that a lot of guys like to lift on the day that they're not playing, which like in theory you would think like, oh, like you just want to keep that day low. But then on the other end, it's like, okay, they're actually fresh and they might not be able, like this might be their best day of the week to actually push in the weight room and get like a good training session in. So what do you do there? I don't know if there's necessarily like a right or wrong answer. But it just goes against like a lot of the things that we might have like just thinking about the high-low system in general. Obviously, the high-low system was built around like a track and field approach to training, which baseball is a much different schedule, like we've kind of alluded to. So I do think it's a lot of it's like it's taking like not like taking what you can get, but like knowing that it's not going to be like ideal, but what's more like ideal for that athlete. Are you going to fight tooth and nail to have someone on like a very like specific schedule, or as long as the work is quality and gets done throughout the week, and they're going to feel better about like, all right, I'm going to lift on these 2 to 3 days a week. That might not be what you think is the most optimal, but it's also like they usually have a pretty good idea of like what makes them feel good, especially as they
Yeah.
like get a little bit older. So, and ideally, your in-season training, while it still should be, ideally like pushing progress or at the least like fighting off detraining, you shouldn't be doing a workout that's going to like bury them for like days on end anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't think that like the training, as counterintuitive it is to me, as to like my mind as it is, I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing. And I think overall, playing if you replace 9 innings of baseball and replace it with a 45-minute lift versus, I think it's still going to be an overall lower day. So
Exactly.
it's overall it's still going to be lower.
The hard part
But
would be just understanding like different stressors for sure. Obviously, like you can be sore from a baseball game after 9 innings, but it's not going to be the same soreness as, hitting a 2 hour lift, depending on what you're lifting. But just knowing that, like overall, like your stressors, even if you're combining them, aren't going to be the same. And they're probably likely way more capable than we give them credit for responding to those stressors. That, it's almost like sometimes we overcomplicate it. Like you mentioned, of like, we want this to be optimal. And it's like, you get into, in a sense, like World Series games. Like, you never know when those are going to go to 14 innings. They have to, there's going to be times where you're going to have to overarch or extend or overreach some of those training blocks to kind of prepare them for that. Or like in the track and field sense, like our conference meet is going to be 2 days back to back. They have to be prepared. Like I would love to have a perfect high-low model. But in our sense, and in the way that the current CAA is set up, we don't have a women's day, men's prelims, and then the third day is like women's finals, men, and then men's finals fourth. It's not there. They have to be able to go back to back. Um,
Hmm.
is that the best thing ever? No, it's definitely not when you think of like what it is. But then that's where like having the
That's the sport.
coaching, that's the sport exactly. Like we want to be able to have the most prepared athletes, or in the sense of like our indoor when everything got combined to one day, and some of these people are doing doubles on these like higher pieces. It's like the people who did the double thresholds and the distance events were able to respond way better and have those performances. The people who regularly have multiple events within the same day are able to respond and have good performances and move on and get the points. Like I think that's where not just like being a performance coach, but also obviously seeing both sides of this from my perspective, like strategizing how we load, not just like, we have this like weekly format, but also like looking at the success of what can work, what should work, what doesn't, and bringing those aspects into training will allow you to have those like higher volumes or the back to back days or things like that, where you might be biting your nails a little bit because you're like, you know, in my sense, it's like, well, we had a speed endurance day to day, but yesterday we had a speed day. Is this, are we kind of like, are we getting nervous, like riding that like double day up? And it's like, well, you could also just modify it a little bit, maybe work a little bit more acceleration based. We can do that under fatigue. It's more muscular, less systemic fatigue, and we can get through it. But now we've like started to, and we can slowly incrementally like increase those distances to now be able to have a high speed day after a speed endurance, or like, you have that lift day. Sometimes you'll see people who like they lift, like you said, lift on the off day, compete the next day. That pitcher might love that. A position player might not, but that's what's necessary. Being able to get them to the place of like, I can compete despite that, even though the situation isn't ideal. If we can get them there, they'll likely probably surprise themselves and us. And then we have those cues of like, we know what works. And if it doesn't work, you kind of know, that leaves cues as well to be able to make that modification.
Yeah, I think I've said it before, but I think like just like a good off season just prepares you for, like, you wouldn't have been able to do that. You can't prepare for, your conference meet getting squished into 12 hours if you didn't build a good base like from, months and months before. So I think it just highlights and it all comes down a lot of times. A lot of it comes down to just like workload over time and like building people up, strategically kind of overreaching more earlier in the off season, and then building more intensity as time goes on, but like making sure that they have that really good base so that they are kind of prepared for, because at the end of the day, it's like the goal isn't to have like the perfect like training structure. It's nice to have a really good training structure, but it's all for nothing if you're not actually prepared for stuff like that, stuff that you can't plan for, which we know like stuff's chaotic, even within a sport like track and field, where like, the distances, it's still chaotic in the sense that, your stuff got pushed into one day. And it's even more chaotic in sports like field sports. For example, like, if we're supposed to get some rain this week, we might have to bang one game and then play a doubleheader the next day. You can't really plan for that. But you need to prepare for it so that, you're ideally in the best position possible to handle it.
Yeah. And that's, this kind of bleeds a little bit into this next topic that you have kind of listed for us, but it's also, I go back to like our off season a lot of times with like football, where our off season is like building, we think of the extensive contacts and slowly, if we look at like our aerobic training here at Elon, we kind of go short to long for sprinting, but then we go kind of long to short and intensify and meet in the middle on this kind of convergence model, which we've talked about before. And and on this, it's slowly walking down the distances, shortening the rest, intensifying the reps to be able to build that density of workload, because we know that if we have the robustness in the system to handle more volume, as we slowly intensify it and walk volume down, we're able to continuously like mesh it and mesh it and mesh it and mesh it. It's the same thing when you have maybe an off season where you're doing a little bit more sprinting and you start to integrate a little bit more whether it be position group work or small group work with batting, with field work, with understanding base running, things like that. As that gets integrated more into your practice, like it will slowly become more intense, and then you'll kind of hit like a little tipping point where it's not only intense, but then you have like that 2 to 3 weeks, maybe four, of we're intense, but we're going to stack volume on this in that kind of like off season as we prepare for truly going into like whether it be spring training, whether it be going into like the affiliate level, where when you have those double headers, you're kind of fine. Like they've been built up above that you can rely on that workload capacity and capacity to hold intensity for longer durations, that it makes it so much easier. And I guess like in a sense, like we can just say like you don't have to think as much about it because everyone always says like the hay's in the barn, we're not going to stock any more in there. It's like we know that we've put enough in there that we're going to last through the winter, that kind of deal. Not to create a hyperbole out of this, but I think that's one of those things that when it's done right, especially, if we look in terms of like baseball, that intensification into more integrated work across the entire team and then building a little bit longer those practice days, they're able to sustain that, and you can able to do that. And the one thing that I like about baseball is that, if we talk about it in the dumbest sense of somebody that doesn't know it, it's do something fast and stand around for a little bit, right? So even when like it is a longer game, yeah, there's more time on feet, but it's not like you're running, 3, 4, 5 miles and having to sustain that twice in a day. It's, can we stack more high intensity efforts still with good rest? So you're able to do that. And I think we don't have to be as mindful about trying to cut back everything as you may want to believe from a performance standpoint. Like they're probably way more resilient than we give them credit for.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, like it all kind of starts from building people up over time. Like baseball is one of those things where it's like it's a lot of time on feet. I don't really know if there's a way to like substitute for that. You just have to get like time on feet and like time on feet like in cleats too. Because like cleats are just a little bit like tougher like on your feet. So like I think that's one of those things where it's very like aerobic in nature overall. A little bit of like anaerobic, like it depends on what position you are, but it's largely like that's one thing I would like to see a little bit more is like I know I would like to see like heart rate data from like a baseball player in a game, and I think it would be really interesting from like a pitcher versus position. I think you'd see like a lot of pitchers would have like really crazy heart rates when they're actually like pitching, but yeah, it's like you said, it's a whole lot of like hurry up and wait. You might get some action. You may get some action on one play, and you may not. You may get action every other play. You may not get any action damn near the whole
At
game,
all.
depending on what position you are. Like, so
In an ideal world, you guys throw no hitters and the
yeah,
outfielders are
exactly,
hanging out.
100%, 100%. Yeah, so
um, but I think this kind of bleeds well into like the next topic that you, like I said, you had listed, which is like the allocation of training economy, like weight room work versus field work. Where do you like put your dispersion of what you focus on? And I think that's a little bit dependent on the sport itself. And does that, and like you said, does that change if we're a sport coach or if you're strictly a strength coach or performance coach?
yeah, I think one, it depends on the sport. One, it depends on like where like the age and where the player is in their career too. Like that's a really good example. Like why do people redshirt? A lot of times, like I'm taking football for example. In college, a lot of people redshirt one because they're not. A lot of times they're not good enough at the actual like sport itself. But I would argue that more so like it's more of like they're just physically underdeveloped. And what is like the main focus a lot of times for redshirts is just like really physically develop. I use football as a good example there, just because I think football is like it's one of those sports where if you're not like physical, like you will get exposed, like you just won't play or you'll like just get you just get fucked up. Versus like ideally you want to be like physical and strong and all that good stuff in every other sport, but like baseball, for example, like it's much more like skill dominant. I would argue there's like So I think it depends on where the player's at in their like career and like what's probably like what's the biggest thing. I think the easiest way that I can think about it is like what's the biggest thing holding them back from, playing more or being a better player at their position. Finding out what that is. Is it skill? Okay. Like are they really like physically dominant? How many times have we seen people that are like freaks in the weight room but like just aren't very good at the skill? Okay. We can probably afford to like kind of pull back and have them be on more of like a I hate to use the word like maintain, but like just like touching stuff. We don't need to be like pushing.
Pushing that volume.
Yeah, we don't need to be like it's more of just like all right, make sure you're touching intensities every so often, make sure you're like hitting your residuals, this and that, and put more of that towards like skill acquisition. Because it's tough to improve with like the skill acquisition part when you're also like burying yourself in the weight room and vice
Yeah.
versa. Versus like if someone's like a very like skilled, but they're just like physically outmatched, okay, maybe it's better served to like put some more training economy towards, the weight room. Or, if they're really strong but super slow, okay, let's pull back in the weight room and maybe allocate a little bit more training economy to like on-field speed work. So I think that comes from you definitely need collaboration between, it's a little bit different for you because you're kind of the jack of all trades for your team. But ideally in most people's scenario, like you need good collaboration between skill and then, performance to say like, okay, you have your numbers, the coach is going to have their metrics of like, okay, like he does this well, he does this bad, like this is the thing that's like holding him back. Or like, oh, like as far as I see, like they're really good in this domain, but this domain they're kind of lacking, and then kind of adjusting whatever that player's current plan is around that. And obviously that's tougher to do because like it depends on how many athletes you have. I think it's easier to probably do like in my situation just because people like we're more focused on just one team versus a lot of people in college. They may work with like multiple teams, stuff like that, and it's also just like switching schedules. But I think I think a big thing that comes down to is like collaboration and actually like knowing what that person's like like lowest hanging fruit or what their bottleneck is to like improve performance. Um, like for example, someone can be I'll use a baseball example of like stealing bases. There's people that are like very fast, like you would see their top end speed, they're very fast, but they don't steal as many bases as you think they would or should because they're not very good, whether it's they're not good at acceleration, they're not good at like getting reads, they're not good at like the actual skill of like base running. So if you
Mhm.
don't really look into that, it's easy to say like, well, they need to get faster. Well, at a certain point, like if a guy can run, 21, 22 miles an hour, like yeah, you can keep trying to push that needle, but like they're probably pretty close to like what they can achieve versus like, okay,
Yeah.
like I notice his 0 to 5 is like very slow. Like his top end is really good. Or maybe he needs to get better at actually like getting reads and jumps off an actual pitcher. Um, how many times do you hear like a sport coach saying like, oh, like there's like we're out of shape or like we're like which sometimes maybe it is valid or like we're physically outmatched, we're slow, stuff like that. Um, I think actually
Yeah.
discerning between skill and like physical qualities is a big part of that. And that, like I said, that takes collaboration, and then that takes more of like a detailed plan for that like specific player.
Yeah. And, to play devil's advocate, it can obviously get really tough when you're in a team setting, or like the average strength coach who may have 4 teams, 5 teams, where they can't just pull a person out of practice to go lift extra because they're physically just not there or whatever it may be. Um, but that's I think that's like where you kind of like what you said, you nailed it on the head is like a good collaboration. You burped and then I burped, but a good collaboration between the two of understanding maybe they're really good in the weight room and having a lot of metrics that we can kind of cross reference. So hey, they're a high jumper, they have great vertical, great approach inside the weight room. They're flying off the jump mat, they're flying off the force deck, whatever it may be, but we're maybe not as good like when we get over the bar. It's like that may be more of a skill based issue, or like a long jumper and their 2-foot takeoffs are incredible, but if we go to ask them to take off down the runway, it's like, okay, well, maybe we can't handle the speed of velocity and then prepare our body to go. All right. Or vice versa. They're so good at the event, but when they come inside the weight room, they're physically weak, but they're contextually strong in what matters. And, if they're great in the weight room and maybe not contextually good, or it's a skill acquisition thing, that's when you can kind of get into some trouble, because it's like you don't want to tell somebody to do their job. But that's when you can say, hey, in my domain, like they're actually like jumping off the rocks, but they're not maybe as great out there. What can we do to kind of put the plan in place to go forward? Vice versa. Hey, you got this, if I just grabbed it and said, hey, we have a 100-meter girl who she's so fast, but she's super weak in the weight room, right? Or whatever it is. Or you got this, you got this guy, he's a multi and he's awesome at this, but he's not great at this. Whatever the case may be, when you get down to it, you're like, okay, what are our metrics that we look at? Okay, those metrics should lead to some kind of correlation, maybe not a causation, but a correlation to, if we throw out dynamic correspondence. I know a lot of people are ifs and buts about that shit, but it's the truth. I don't care what anyone says. If something's probably going to look or magnify some of the aspects of what the sport is, it's probably going to lead to a little bit better success. If they're not as good at that, they may be limiting their capacity for the sporting aspects. So having those conversations, and I think this is where like a communication, either breakdown or a really good communication, can improve the overall product. That's where those things will happen. Now, if we look at it from like just an S&C standpoint, like if we're looking at like allocating training economy or training time, right? I think a good rule of thumb is like what probably plays the most important thing. If you look at a wrestler, they want to be strong, but like someone who back squats 500 probably isn't always a great wrestler. You're looking at it and go, he's not great at like, or she, whoever it is, they're not great at maneuvering another weird implement or object or body, or maybe they gas out. So it's their aerobic stuff. Like they're strong, they're not contextually strong. Or if vice versa, they only want to do body weight because they're really not strong inside the weight room. But the minute they have to go maneuver around another human body, they're doing head throws, they're hitting a flying squirrel, whatever it is. Like that's those kind of things will kind of lead you of like, where do you need to allocate more time? I think a good rule of thumb, if you think about like a lot of field-based sports, it's like, if you're looking at it from like an off-season perspective of like, where do we spend more time? Probably spend a little bit more time towards the field. I think you'll get more out of that than what you will in the weight room. You'll have diminishing gains inside the weight room. You can still address strength work, hypertrophy work, or resiliency work, whatever you want to call it. But a soccer player is probably going to need a little bit more aerobic development, and the contacts on feet, especially in cleats, as we've kind of already talked about, that's going to be more important than them front or back squatting whatever number. Can they survive a game or practice, and are they able to accelerate, decelerate, change directions, and have the what we would call like game speed to interpret the environment, react to it, and play well. It all just comes down to the specific situation. And we've always talked about like it's the bullshit answer of it depends, but it really does depend. But if you're looking at like a general rule of thumb, I think spend a little bit more time on field because you'll get more out of it. It's probably, again, going back to it, it's probably a little systemically fatiguing more often than not, unless it's aerobic based training. But would you rather have somebody work through 20 to 40 intensive contacts on the field in cleats, whether it be bounding, jumping, whatever, or have them do it on a jump mat? You're probably better off putting them in the cleats and having them do it on the field, because sometimes they're gonna have to do that. And like, if they're great when everything's stable, but like then you get them on that different playing surface and it's all falling apart, it's like, okay, well, we should probably allocate more time to that. I don't know if I made sense on it, but that's where I was kind of thinking.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. I think we kind of hit the nail on the head here. I think one topic that I do want to get to. Sorry, we're just doing all my topics. Well, we did. We just did predatory marketing one. This is the one that I
want to talk about anyway.
Yeah. So, artificial intelligence, AI. I've seen I'm not
I love
someone
it.
that's used AI a whole lot, and I think personally I'm like a little bit leery because not that I don't think it can be useful, it's just that I don't think I want to know how to use it and not use it as a crutch. I know there's definitely a way that we can use it to like help us. So I guess the question is like how can coaches or just like people in general like effectively use artificial intelligence to learn and improve their skill set without using it as a crutch and like losing just the ability to think for themselves? Because I've seen like members of like our staff that like use it and I think they probably use it in a really good way. I think I'm just generally like a little bit like leery about it just because I don't want it to just be like, all right, I wonder what the answer to this is, and then I'm just, using it and then never thinking for myself. But I do think that there is a way where we can use it to kind of like whether it's speed up the process or, if you're looking for like a summary on a certain topic that you don't really have a lot of time to like go through and find a bunch of different research papers and you just kind of want it synthesized. And then if you need to, you can kind of look a little bit deeper from that summary. What's your take on, AI within, coaching specifically, or it could just be like working professionals, and how do you, if you use it, how do you use it?
Two things. Number one, I love the use of AI. So I'm probably coming at it from a different angle. Um, and when you first talk about like if you talk about it like as just a professional, that's when we kind of talk. Guest of the show, Bev Boy, he loves it. Hewitt Tomlin, he brought up a great point to me, and it was being a fully leveraged leader. Is there stuff that you have during your day that takes too much time that you can't have, that you don't necessarily need the personal touches, and you can probe an artificial intelligence to work the back end with processes? If that's a case and you can teach it and machine learn what your process is in order to expedite some of these not dumb tasks, but like more menial but time consuming tasks, have it run the data, And then if you look at it from like a coaching side, I think AI is a bigger threat, I think, to sports scientists than it is to coaches. AI, if you say, hey, I want you to build me a program, it's going to say 3x10, 3x8, 3x6, 3x5, 4x5, 4x8, 4x10, blah, 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 blah. It's going to give you the standard programming that's all over the internet and basic shit. Every coach is going to want to put their own flair of what they want and how they want to coach it to be intentful. What I think AI is really good for in the coaching realm is not data collection, but data cleaning and data visualization. It does a good job on that. And I use it myself when it comes to like, hey, I'm going to export data. I want you to clean it, organize it, and I want you to present to me what I'm looking for. And, we make the joke here at Elon of like, it's vibe coding, whatever it is, but it's like, I'm going to be a visionary and be creative in what I want this to look like. And I'm going to have something implement that, because not everybody knows the skill truly of coding in order to build something. But what you do know is what you want it to look like in order to get the data that matters most to you and quickly visualized. So you can go on some of this stuff and be able to drop data in there, obviously being concerned about like HIPAA and, qualifying metrics. So you don't want to just throw that in the atmosphere. But if you're like, hey, I want to be able to present like we've improved XYZ, or I want to track this in a different way, you can do the machine learning, prompt it, probe it, make adjustment, have it code, drop things into, a locked FTP server in a localized environment and have it visualize whatever you're bringing out. In the same chord, like I use it right now for continued education. I think it's great. You can prompt it and say, I want you to scan and I want you to give me one of each of these 3 topics, and I want you to spit that out to me right now. And you can just refresh every day, and now you have 20 to 30 minutes of learning that you can improve on without having to find and sift and be like, this doesn't look great, this doesn't look right. It's like 1, 2, 3, boom, you have that, and you can probe it. Which I think that's like a big thing that people will start to understand within the use of AI is being able to probe it to get where you want to go versus just blatantly asking and having it do the work. Because that's also going to teach you the skill set of
asking better questions.
Asking better questions. Yeah, exactly. Like a vague question gets a vague answer. We've always said that. But if you can probe it to be very direct on, I'm looking for this type of information, it gives you kind of what you're looking for, but not right. Then you ask that clarifier. And then you get clarifying. And then the next time you do it, you start to realize, like, okay, I know exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to command you to do this. I'm going to have it do this. Same thing when we talk about like the data visualization or like data cleaning, where it's like, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm looking for out of this data. I'm going to tell you that there's going to be data points inside of this that don't matter. I want you to only grab XYZ. I want you to present it to me in this format. And I want you to do it where I can and build something to continuously drop this into. And I want to link it to whatever, Supabase, GitHub, whatever it is. And bing, bang, boom. It does the skill, the administrative work for you of building this thing, but you're still the idea behind it. And you're still the creative mind that's getting it to that point. You just don't have to spend 8 hours at night learning Python, learning R or HTML or JavaScript in order to make that occur. You essentially now have an assistant. And I think that's where it works best, is assisting you to get where you need to go versus like going hands off the wheel, Carrie Underwood. I think it's Carrie Underwood, like Jesus take the wheel, and letting it just run.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I think it serves a really good purpose. And like I said, I use it in these kind of terms, and it's worked out great to where I have different things that I'm looking for, not to give away the farm, but I just know that I can click this, open it up with the data I've input and say, bing, bang, boom. It's like, or you can have it like I've gone through like stuff that I potentially am going to write. I drop it in there and I'm like, find a problem because of an increase in total volume week to week or day to day where it's too much of a spike based off of the prerequisites that I'm setting it into it. Audit what I'm doing. Tell me where, versus me going, no, I think this is a necessity. It's got to be in there. Maybe it says, hey, you have 3 items on this day that you flared up or flagged. Now I go in there, I relook at it, and I go, well, now I need to make that change. How do I do it? And I'm not asking it to tell me how I should do that, but I'll ask myself, make the changes, rerun it. Boom. Now I'm down to 0 flags. I have, in my mind, at least in this sense, like I have a more efficacious program that I know will be safe, but also pushing the needle forward. That's where I think it provides the most value. I do think it's still useful, like you said, for like research summaries and things like that, where you can then dump that in there. Hey, quickly summarize what are our main pieces from this. But I would say using it in that term would be like, put this in there because I want to know if this is worth me digging into further versus like, I just want to have it spit out a summary and then I say, okay, understand it fully. Like knowing how to use it is just as important as using it, almost more.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the thing that I was thinking about is like, you can ask it questions, but just like reading a summary, it can't be the same as like you read the whole paper and like you dug into it a little bit deeper. And that's where like, but I like the point that you made about like almost using it as like as an assistant, like as a coach, like the same as you might like ask someone to like look over your program. You can do it with AI, and it's like a little bit different perspective. And I think like how, like you said, how you prompt it is probably a big part of it. Like kind of stress testing your own ideas. I think it's important to like probably have an opinion formed already, and then you can maybe put that in there and be like, all right, like what are the weak points of this, and just kind of stress test it against there. But yeah, I think like you said, like it's good to like automate processes or where you just don't have as much time. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting, I think.
It's like I said, it's a good tool, but I think the tool means nothing. It's like a carpenter and a saw. A saw to an average person it can cut, but a saw or a chisel to a carpenter is very useful. And I think learning to be the carpenter with the AI is what will be meaningful with the implementation of it. And that's where it kind of goes back to like the machine learning aspect of like teaching it, what your rules are. And once it learns that, then you can start to, which takes time. And, it's an initial setup that you have to do. But like, if you just dump a program in there and say, hey, what's wrong with this? It's not going to know. It's going to start to spit out things that it's pulling from the ether. But if you're like, hey, here's my 10 things I look for.
here's my principles
describing.
that I'm looking for. This is what I'm afraid of. This is like what I think may be off. Like this is the context of the situation. Yeah.
That's when you can leverage it to be very useful.
Yeah. I guess it's almost, I mean, it's like you said, it's like an assistant. Like you have to train the assistant to kind of like know your system, just how you would train an employee to know your system. So it takes a
Exactly.
little bit more time up front, but in the long run, if you do it right, it can give back,
Great
tenfold and be
feedback.
very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I think that that's where most sports scientists will become very, they'll become auditors of it. It's the same reason of like if you talk about AI with coding, junior developers may lose their jobs left and right because they're writing the code. Senior developers are going to now switch from cross-checking or fact-checking junior developers code into fact-checking, AI coded stuff.
Hmm.
Where those early entry points are probably going to be a lot harder to find. And like I said, the sports scientists in the situation, they go from, hey, building a Power BI or whatever AMS into cross referencing and checking or teaching the machine to go, where it's almost like you may turn into like contract work. I don't think it'll ever take the job of a coach. It'll take over a little bit of some of the stuff that not everyone has the time for, but they want to use.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing if something's a little bit more validated and accessible to the public. Does everything move forward and we stop focusing and hyperfixating on the small things that people want to be niche in, and it becomes more accessible, and then you can go
Hmm.
back to swing the pendulum back of like being the person of creatively writing the program, implementing the program on the floor, developing the relationships with the athletes where that runs in the background.
Yeah. I'm all for it if it's taking away stuff that's, tedious and like takes no real skill to do, but is very like time intensive, whether it's, manually entering data, stuff like that, or, whatever things like that,
Mm-hmm.
in order to save time there to focus more of your time and efforts on what you deem to be more important.
Exactly. Like I've seen it. Somebody has like transcribed, like they've written, vertical jumps on a piece of paper, and they took a picture and said, "I want you to transcribe this into a computer format so I could copy and paste it, whatever I need to do."
Yeah.
Let it do
Like
that. Let it do that stuff.
yeah, that's smart. That's smart to me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It's a weird thing, but I think we don't have to go all in and be that's how we do everything, but like embracing it and using the tool while you have it available and building stuff
yeah.
for the future, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I think it's clearly like not going away. I think like
Mm-hmm.
learning how to you kind of have to just ride the wave. It's only going to continue from here. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Damn.
Went
Should
through a
we
lot
wrap
of
this? Yeah, should we wrap this bad boy up? That was good. That was a good conversation.
Yeah. You want to go first on the Juneberry?
Yeah. So Juneberry, I gassed it pretty quick. It was good. Like I said, I'm usually not a huge fan of like the original Red Bull, but when they do their seasonal flavors, their seasonal additions, especially in the sugar free, I think they're pretty damn good. Um, I'd say this is probably one of my favorite flavors I've had. I really liked the watermelon too, but I think I like this one even a little bit more. Now, I think I paid 249 for this can, which honestly for a Red Bull isn't that bad. It's still, only an 8.4 ounce can, a little bit lower on the caffeine, 80 milligrams, but it was kind of what I was looking for. Probably not going to be like a daily driver, but if I am picking up a Red Bull, this would probably be one of the first flavors that I'm going to go to. So for that, I think we have to rank it within that category. I'm gonna give it like a 7.3. The price is good. The flavor is really good, and for what I want it for, I think it's good. Can't really compare it to something like a Gorilla Mind or like a Ghost, but I think for the category of being like a low caffeine energy drink, the taste is good. The price point is better than I found at any other place. So shout out the Shell Station in Louisville, Kentucky for that. But yeah, go 7.3 on the old Juneberry.
Sick. Red Bull's getting ranked higher.
Yeah.
Um, C4 Serial Killer. It's such an odd flavor. Formula. We love C4's formula. I got a little bit of tingles in me right now, which is great. I don't know if you see me kind of get a little antsier. It's such a sick looking can. I think it's something that they haven't necessarily done is kind of like really take over the creativeness of like the solid branding of color. Um, as a flavor, it's I don't know, like I said, same thing with you. I don't know if it's a daily driver. It is a fun flavor that like you throw in the mix and you're like, it's kind of cool. Um, Overall, I would say knowing that it's gonna be you're gonna taste it's gonna taste like you have a little bit of milk in the can. You're gonna taste Fruit Loops. I'm gonna go solid like 7.6. Very good. Not a daily driver, but if you're going there and you're like, I want something different, this is what I would go to get something different. Um, it's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Um, I will say this, now we're kind of wrapping up here. Everybody, you guys know where to find us. Follow us on Instagram. It's badboys.tv. Our accounts are always attached to most clips, if not every single one of them. Subscribe to us on YouTube, like the video, all the good stuff, right? We love all the good stuff. We also have new merch out there. During this downtime, I was able to kind of get on there. We've got some new things. Just as a little bit of fun on this point, we're going to show you guys what we're cooking with. We have some new gear, right? So we have our Living the High Life tee. It's super fun, kind of that old school like logos. Obviously, for anyone who knows, that's a fun logo right there. As we kind of go back, we also have our Bad Boys Barbell Club tee. Got the emblem on the front chest, and then the back of it in great colors. We have the pastels, we have the blues, we have the pinks. Super sick, fun time. And then we have a V2 in not only a t-shirt, but the trucker in the Bev Boys Paul Mall tee. Obviously, we smoke them if you got them, but on the back, we got a revamped logo. I think it looks sick. Take this, get a size larger, rock that as a pump cover, rock the Barbell Club as a pump cover, wear this when you're going to the beach, you're hanging out with friends, maybe at a campfire. You got to do this. It's great gear, it's high quality materials. I don't know how we got the materials and got a great vendor for that, but we do. We have some of that gear coming our way right away for us because I was like, we got to get our hands on it or whip it on the show as soon as it ships in. But go pick up a shirt, pick up a hoodie, pick up a hat, get in there, turn on the show, wear the gear, send us pictures of you wearing the gear. We'd love it. But overall, thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.
Peace.